Stay with that investment conference. Brand SA is involved in the conference, which aims to reignite economic growth and boost investor confidence in the country. This morning, we speak to research manager at Brand SA, Dr. Petrus de Kock, who will tell us why investors should pump their money into South Africa. Are you able to answer that first question?
Indeed,
why
yes.
are we the investment destination for investors around the world?
Well, if you look at European business, 68% of them based in South Africa use South Africa as a base for operations into the region.
Yeah.
If you look at South Africa's diversified economy, and in fact today the investment conference starts just outside Tshwane in Rossland with the launch of the Automotive Special Economic Zone, which is a very important initiative. I think the Minister Patel also recently opened the Platinum Special Economic Zone in the Rustenburg area. And I think there's one thing to be said, that South Africa's special economic zones are very competitive if you look at it in global standards. If you look at occupancy rates and if you look at the kind of services and infrastructure offered, it is really a very strong proposition, especially in a year next year when the Continental Free Trade Area is operationalized. So one can do some very interesting thinking on how our base of infrastructure and business capability can ultimately play positively towards business expansion in the region.
Before we talk about how much progress has been made in realizing the commitments of the inaugural conference last year, I want to talk about the Rugby World Cup. I mean, it's a moment to celebrate, but as people like yourself, who I imagine are in the marketing space, what do events like that, sporting events like that, do for the marketability of the country?
It's actually quite tremendous. There's two things one can talk about. You can talk about sport, because South Africa, if you look at reputation indicators, we are incredibly well known for two things, not just in terms of sporting prowess as a nation in all codes, one can say, of athletics and sports, but also as a hosting nation. And that still comes from hosting the 2010 World Cup. So there's two dimensions to it. You know, we're very well known in the sport world in all kinds of areas of activity, and what it does is it creates awareness. You know, there's not a single person on the planet now who follows rugby who does not know South Africa.
Where South Africa
exactly,
is.
yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about the commitments that were made at the inaugural conference. That was in October last year. Upwards of 290 billion rand was committed, but how much of that has actually translated into rands and cents and actual investments that people can see and touch?
I must start off with that Minister Patel and the team, the organizing team, is incredibly insistent on vetting these projects, you know, as they come through. Invest SA, the entity tasked with channeling investment into the economy, does a lot of background work on, as the information comes through, to vet and check. Now, as you said, roughly $20 billion of commitments made last year, and I'll talk to two quick examples. I think earlier on in your earlier segment you referred to Mara, the cell phone company. It's actually a Rwandan company.
It's a Rwandan company,
which is very interesting. Yeah, and they are here. The work is beginning on the investment, so there's actual activity happening. Exaro, for example, the mining company, South African company, they made a major announcement at the conference last year, and in this last few weeks they've actually been communicating on and showing what has been happening to their commitment of last year. So I think we could really definitely reassure the public, you know, that what is announced at the investment conference has gone through an incredibly rigorous process of vetting and then follow up to see what happens after the conference.
Dr. de Kock, apart from the obvious, flagging economy that's not growing, and other social pressures that are there for this country, what are some of the major concerns when you are out there punting brand South Africa?
Look, I think if what we've seen in the last few years, and this is something nothing unknown in the media and in our public debate, you know, issues of corruption and state capture has definitely affected us. And that's also why the President, when he engages with these kind of issues, he insists on the importance of our institutions working, number one, on understanding what happened. Those who are guilty of certain things must be brought to book. So that has impacted on us, but I think we've turned that corner already. We can definitely see in a lot of indicators that we find from 2018, especially since President was inaugurated the first time, a very quick turnaround in global opinion on South Africa, on those particular kinds of issues. So yes, we come across the issues, but I think what we need to understand as South Africa as well, we also had a very hostile global economy. If you look at trade war dynamics and the impact it has had on trade dynamics, on FDI flows, then this investment conference is incredibly important for the country to showcase who we are, what we have to offer investors, number one, and number two, to do that job of convincing, because it is getting increasingly competitive out there to draw FDI to emerging markets particularly.
Dr. Petrus de Kock, thank you very much for making the time to speak to us this morning.
Thank you.
He is with Brand South Africa, and he's a research manager.